Now, in the last lecture, we created our struct instance, so a value based on our type blueprint, and we did this with this struct literal notation, as it's also called. Now, when creating such instances, there are two important things you should know. First, if you are assigning all these key value pairs in the order in which they were defined in the blueprint, so first the first name, then the last name, and so on, just as we're doing it here, then you can actually also omit that key and just specify the values. So that works. But you have to make sure that the order is the same as in the blueprint, because otherwise a value will be assigned to the wrong key. For example, down here, if I swap last name and first name, I'm not getting an error here, but of course now user last name would end up in the first name field. So that's something to be aware of, but you can then use the shorter notation. Here I'll go back to that longer notation though, since that notation makes it very clear which value goes into which field. The other thing you should know is that you can also create an empty struct here, like this, by using the struct literal without any values between these curly braces. This is the null value of this struct type here, and it will create such a user type value, but of course it will essentially be an empty value. There will be no values for first name, last name, and so on, as you can imagine. Therefore here I'll go back to the version with values. You can also omit just some values if you don't have a value that should be stored, for example. In that case, all the other keys will be set, and that one omitted value, the birth date, for example, will be set to the null value of that type you chose for that value. So for birth date, it would be set to an empty string, if you omit that down there. And that's therefore how you can create a struct with that struct literal notation. Now let's see how we can work with that struct value.